Welcome to the next edition of Fridays with Fintelekt. Today we have with us Dr. Elena Scherschneva, an independent expert trainer and consultant in the field of AML CFT and head of the AML Academy based in Austria. Elena started her career as a police officer and worked her way up to be the head of the FIU at the Federal Ministry of the Interior based in Vienna. Elena, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're very welcome, Shirish. It's a great pleasure. So I'm very happy to be with you today, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Super. And I must say I enjoyed the view that is behind you. I think it looks like you're on holiday.
No, I'm not on holiday. That's actually my garden. So that's my everyday working space.
Right.
And I decided that you should enjoy it as well.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So, Elena, at the outset, could you give our listeners a quick snapshot of your professional career so far? What are some of the factors or let's say milestones that shaped it and what you are focusing on currently?
Yes, of course. So you already mentioned that I'm a police person. So I started my career in the police of Vienna, and I switched quite soon to the Russian organized crime unit at the Criminal Intelligence Service, and later on to the FIU, which was the next logical step because organized crime is dealing with a lot of money. So I wanted to know where this money is coming from, where it's going to, and how to stop it. And yes, actually, 2 years ago, I left the Ministry of the Interior. So now I'm a freelancing consultant and trainer. I still have a lot of this law enforcement soul in me. So I'm still very focused on compliance solutions that are how should I say that just prevent money laundering. So I personally think that a good fight with money laundering always starts with strong compliance systems in the private sector. And that was also one of the reasons why I decided to go into the training and to work there where actually the problem starts to really appear. So I work a lot with reporting entities. I also do still some things for governments or also for the European Union, for the European Commission in particular. And that's a good mix. So I enjoy it a lot. And yeah, that's what I do now.
Excellent. So, Elena, to start off the discussion on the subject, let's start with the European AML Directive, which is considered to be the most stringent in the world. What would you say are the most effective regulatory parts of the AMLD?
Well, I would say at the one hand, it's definitely the issue that we have a kind of harmonization in Europe now. So that's a very strong part which the AMLD put in place while being, let's say. Even if the different countries find other ways to put it in place, it still sets up a common standard, and that was actually also the idea from the European Union, as far as I'm concerned, that they wanted all the European countries to be at least technically compliant with the FATF provisions. And you said that it's one of the stringent or most stringent regulations. That's also because it's almost the copy paste of the 40 FATF recommendations. I think we can say it like that. I believe that it's a very important issue that the AMLD also took this FIU requirements and put it into practice, because this wasn't the case so detailed, let's say, until the 4th Anti-Money Laundering Directive, and now with the 5th we also have more powers written down for the FIU to harmonize all the FIU information exchange, also the information exchange between the competent authorities. I also believe that a very strong issue of the AMLD are the registers that are required now. So I'm talking most of all not about the beneficial owner register, but about the centralized account registers that have to be there in the countries now, and that has a big influence on the time you need to put your information together. So it makes the whole system quicker and the data more accessible. And that's, I think, definitely one of the very, very important regulation issues that the AMLD is covering, besides all the other good stuff, of course, with KYC requirements and so on. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. So, Elena, according to you, what are some of the priority areas that banks and FIs in Europe as well as globally need to address to make their AML safety programs more effective? And do you believe these priority areas change depending on the size, ownership type, and let's say geographical spread of the bank?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that the development of the last years, the interaction within the financial sector and so on, made the requirements stronger for the bank. So it's very easy for a customer today to put a value in country A and to take it out in country X. So the way is very short. It goes within a very small period of time. And that's the biggest challenge, I think, also for the banks, for the financial institutions. On the one hand, to know who the customer is, included the beneficial ownership, which is also, from my perspective, the biggest challenge in practice, to figure out who the ultimate beneficial owner is, not the one in the register, because that's a complete different story, as you know. But this transparency, because when transactions go very fast, so when it's very easy to transfer this money, on the other hand, you need a very, very big transparency to be able to grant this speed to the customer. And we see it, frankly speaking, again now. I don't know if you already have this information also in your country. I guess, of course. But in Austria, yesterday, the FinCEN leaks were also released. And there you again see that the European banks have been used, especially as correspondence banks, to transfer billions of dollars from, let's say, unclear sources to Europe. And that is something that wouldn't work if the systems weren't there. So what I believe is that in the last years, the requirements for the banks are much more complex. So it's really required to understand what's going on, and that is, in my opinion, one of the hardest steps, to take the responsibility to decide what to do with customers, even without a possible feedback from the FIU. And I think that's this challenge that is occurring here in this new situation.
Right.
Or in the situations as we have seen them in the last years.
Right. So, Elena, one of the complaints that most of the regulators always have is that the quality of suspicious transaction reports filed by reporting entities are not very useful at times. So, you've been in that position as well, where you've seen a lot of reports. So, can you provide any pointers for banks to improve the quality of the STRs or SARs filed by them, in order to actually make them more effective and useful, both to the FIU as well as, consequently to the sector regulators or to the law enforcement agencies?
Yes, that's a very important question. And I believe that first of all, we need to understand that these are two different systems that we are operating in. So when you look at the 40 recommendations and also at the AML directive and at all the laws that we have in other countries around the world, these systems that apply for the banks and for the other reporting entities are preventive systems, meaning that the main task when you are fulfilling and doing your KYC, CDD, EDD, whatever checks, the purpose is to prevent criminals from the misuse of the financial system. Okay, so the purpose is not to find a perpetrator and to bring him into jail, But the purpose is that if a person comes with a suitcase full with money and he wants to pay it in and it's not clear where the source from the money is from, then he just shouldn't be able to do it. That's the main purpose of all that regulations. And then there is of course also the possibility to file an SDR if really something suspicious occurs. But that's another step. And in my let's say my experience shows that it gets mixed up very easily. So what happens is that banks file an SDR and then they try to well, let's say to make the FIU responsible to decide what should happen with the customer. And that's not what the system is made for. So the system is made for the bank being able to send away a customer if he's generally not properly declared or whatever. Yeah. So when banks file an SDR, I think it's very important to consider that they know the customer quite well and that the FIU doesn't know their customers at all. So that's the very first step, that it's important to explain why this particular customer with his particular behavior is suspicious. What was it? Why did you file the SDR? And that's an information that is sometimes missed. Of course, it depends on the system in your country. So when you have only threshold reports without any additional information, that you wouldn't be able to give this information. But in the systems where you have suspicious action reports, that is a very, very important step. So to explain why the suspicion. And the second important step, which is important for the bank, is to decide already in advance, how shall I deal with this customer? If the FIU maybe doesn't react, if I don't receive any feedback, shall I keep him? Shall I make the next 100 transactions and having like a stomach ache every time, you know? So that's, you're laughing, I'm laughing, but that's actually, that's a very important topic, because that's the root of, I think, 90% of the problems that we have now in the last years in the media. So these are banks who decide, okay, this customer is kind of maybe a little bit weird, but we will keep him because he brings a lot of money, and that's not the idea of the system. And I think the third very important point is to understand that the banks and the financial sector are doing an awesome job. They're doing a highly qualified job where they see a lot of things, where they realize that a lot is going on, where they are making a lot of right decisions, but still it has nothing to do with the fact whether this SDR will lead to a court proceeding or to an investigation or not. Because what the authorities are working with is the predicate offense, is the suspicion of a concrete criminal action. And there is a huge gap between the customer being not really stringent with what he's saying and a criminal procedure that leads to arrest and to confiscations and so on. And people should consider that this gap is real, that they can't do actually nothing to close it. So that's maybe a little bit frustrating, but I don't want it to sound frustrating. It's just, it's important to understand that these are two different worlds. And the success of a law enforcement procedure, and if there will be any conviction or not, is not dependent by the SDR the bank is filing at the end of the day, but of the quality and of the possibilities that the law enforcement authorities are putting into this case, and also of the, let's say, intelligence and capabilities of the criminals that are acting. Because when a criminal wants to disguise a specific source of money, a specific criminal action, and he is really putting efforts into it, and he's sitting at home and thinking, brainstorming for 2 years how will be the best thing to do it, then he will succeed, most likely. So then he really needs there needs to be a mistake that the authorities still can catch him. But the bank is sitting in the position that they can say, okay, sounds good, but no.
Right.
And that's, I think that's the situation.
Right. Very well put, Elena. So, Elena, I also wanted to get your thoughts on public-private partnerships. The pandemic and the rise in financial crime activity across the world has actually brought more focus on this, area of, let's say, financial information sharing and PPPs. So, what are your views on PPPs? I mean, are there any particular areas that you think such partnerships would be most suited based on your experience?
Yeah, so to take all the tension, let's say from the beginning, I think that PPPs are really a great thing. So it's absolutely necessary to cooperate to exchange information, because all of that, all these mechanisms we were already talking about are at the end of the day based on trust. So that's just the human component in that. So when a bank files an SDR, there is some trust needed that the authorities will handle it quite well. And you can build trust only by cooperating by making good experiences together and by seeing that it works. And it's the same the other way around, because as long as the authority believes that any information that they give to the private sector will be forwarded to possible customers or perpetrators, there will be no such information exchange. And therefore, I think that it's very, very important that the private sector, the supervision sector, and also the law enforcement sector cooperate very closely, that they get to know each other, that they get to know each other needs, because this what we were talking before about what does need to be mentioned in an SDR and so on. That's a very individual thing. So in country A, it might be something completely different as in country B. And you can only communicate this need and enhance the whole system when you are communicating together, when you're working together, when you trust each other. And in that light, I believe that it's very important that we have all these PPP projects. But there is one thing that needs to be considered. You can't force someone to trust. So when you have let's say a national situation that isn't a good ground for this trust to grow, then you can put PPP initiatives in the law for 1,000 times and nothing will work. So it will be only paper. So yes, it's definitely a good thing. It needs to be also pushed a little bit by the government to make it possible that every authority stretches a little bit, and let's say also, like we say in Austria, jumps over its shadow and shares information and just meets people, communicates with them. But still, the most important factor are the people that are participating. And as long as these people don't fit together, it's hard to build a really good PPP environment.
Right. So, in closing, Elena, our community is made up mainly of AML CFT compliance folks. So, what is your advice to them in terms of the practical skills or capabilities that they should develop to become more successful in their careers going forward?
The first skill is a soft skill, and it's I would call it as responsible thinking. So it's I think it's very important to develop a good feeling of the circumstances that you see. I always say it's all you feel it in your stomach, you feel it in your gut when something is not good with a customer, if something is not okay. And I think that especially in the compliance, the trust for this feeling is key, because when you don't have a good feeling, then it's nothing that fell off the sky. It's a total let's say consolidation of all your experience that you made through your whole life, through your all professional career, and this is something you should trust. maybe it's nothing that you can reasonably, let's say, put down and say, okay, that's the thing that is disturbing in all that case, but your subconscious knows it. And I think that you really should start trusting your gut. You should trust your feeling about particular customers. And if you don't have a good feeling, then don't go for it. Then find a reason to end the customer relationship. And I think then you will be on a good path. And in terms of professional skills, I think that analysis of data, this capability to bring data together and to get the to get a result from it, that this is required more than ever in our times, because data keeps growing. There will be also a need for a basic understanding for new technologies, such as all this analytical programs, also maybe artificial intelligence. What's definitely needed is that you keep on informing yourself about what's going on in the world outside. What do criminals use? What new technologies do criminals have? You shall know that you can that it's not really an effort to buy a falsified or forged document in the darknet. It's like 5 minutes and 3 clicks and you have it. And you need to be aware of that. And to be aware of that, you still need to keep on inform yourself about what's going on. And you should really work on your capability to just meet decisions and to stand to these decisions, because this non-decision taking, in my opinion, is really one of the of the parts that makes the situation as we have it in the world now. Because in every big case, there were thousands of people who said, yes, from the beginning, I thought that this might not be a good idea. And there are 100 people like this, and every one of these 100 said, well, but let's do it anyway, because nobody is making a decision that we shouldn't. So be yourself the one who takes this decision, if possible, of course, in terms of your standing, and stand for it, go for it.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much, Elena. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, and thanks for being here with us on Fridays with Fintelekt. It was really a pleasure to host you.
Thank you very much, Shirish, for the invitation. It was also a pleasure to have this talk with you, and yeah, I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Wish you the very same, Elena.